is simultaneously describing all three of those parts, all three of those moving pieces. The Powered by the Apocalypse games are really good at this, at showing off what individual parts are like and how you can pick them. I find sometimes that those games are written so that the lists are not quite long enough for my taste, but the calibrated ones have the list exactly the right length, and it's often just a few too few than you wish the list had, because you find yourself making a choice that's really tough, and that's what they're designed to do. And so that's the other thing I would do is when you have that atomic list is I would say to the player, so you shoot the stormtrooper, he's dead, and the panel behind him explodes. Was it a coolant control panel or a gravity control panel? I'll let the player pick one of those two things, just in part because it keeps the conversation happening, as opposed to you just going, hang on and saying, what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens? Just make it a choice, and it's a player choice, not a character choice, and they go, oh, it was a gravity panel. You go, yeah, it was, and now everybody's in 0G.
So pass the buck to the player.
Yeah, right.
Well, make it as an offer, right? So rather than just saying, what bad thing happened? Do that thing like we talked about before, the questions, which is where you offer two possible answers. And if they say, oh, neither, I think it's this third thing, and you think it's cool, then your answer is, of course it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have thought of that.
But if it was like, oh, it activates the disco ball, it's like, no, it doesn't.
Right, obviously, no.
And the gravity's off.
Right, so the disco ball comes on.
And the gravity's off.
The disco ball blinds you.
That's right.
The lights,
Yes.
so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Still on the same basic thread. I have a couple of players in that game that really want to stick to the rules. Okay, and the game itself starts off, one of the first sentences it says in each of the books is, these are not these are guidelines. Don't and you know. And some of the rules that they came up with aren't very cinematic, especially during combat. So I was starting off. When players rolled threat or rolled advantage, I was coming up with very cinematic things that happened that fit that. And I had players going, well, we'd rather stick to this little chart here that says, if you roll this many threat or this many advantage, you get this. So the thing that I came up with to that was, well, you have to tell me why you get that from the chart. And I don't know whether that's going to come back to bite me, you know, forcing them to come up with a cinematic reason for why they get that from the chart, or if.
And another, possibility is you apply the dumb rules to the dumb players and the awesome rules to the awesome players. It's like, you pick out the dumb chart. These guys get to float around in zero gravity. Now who's cool?
I gave them the choice, and they still said, no, we don't want that. We want the chart for everybody. And I'm like,
no, they don't get that. You're the GM.
I had the choice of either breaking the group, because they wouldn't play without those kinds of rules.
Then you should fire them. They're jackasses. Fire them and replace them with other people.
Really?
I've one step before. I have the middle way. The thing I would do before you fire them, to find out if you have to fire them, which is.
Obviously, document a pattern of misbehavior. Because
they can
go to the union, and then there's a big thing.
No,
especially it's under 30 days. So, you know.
Because part of it is if you say, why does that happen in a way that makes it dramatic, where you want them to do it so that you're like, okay, that's cool, but what does it look like? That's cool, but what does it look like to this player over here? What do they see when the chart happens in this way? So that you get them slowly coaxed into the process of getting into the narrative aspect without. So there's not a question of get into the narrative and abandon the chart. You get them to say, get into the cinematic aspect, and we'll do the chart. And then eventually they start learning why the chart is optional, and they might slowly come off it a little bit, and you can kind of get some of your harmony going. But the reason I bring that up is because the question I have is what is it that they're afraid is going to happen if they go off the chart? Right? And I don't know, and I don't know if they know.
The reasoning I was given was that some of the cinematic responses I was giving to threats and advantages were actually worth more than the one advantage. What they felt was worth more than the one advantage or the one threat that they actually rolled.
Right.
So they felt it was improportional.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, that's part of the nature of that system. Sure, yeah. That's part of the nature of that system is that it's just fuzzy enough at the edges to empower cinematic play with the same mechanism that's in the game. But if not everybody agrees on how much one little explosion icon is worth, the game doesn't necessarily solve that argument. I mean, obviously it doesn't.
Yeah.
So the other thing I would say is to find out, to reach a kind of, I mean, you could get really, I don't want to say it's fiddly with it, but you could do something like, if you're following the chart, this is what one explosion is worth, this is what two are worth, this is what one threat is worth, this is what two are worth. You could say, make it a question of like, so how long do I get to go on for, basically, for each one of these, right? So like it is like one thing is I get to make one pick off a list of, it's a +1, great. and I can, a +1, I can describe it as being bigger than it sounds, but it's still, we know it's going to be the chart bigger. Or it can literally be, I get to, you know, we established how many stormtroopers can be killed by 2 pluses, by a second level effect. And we can amend the chart so that it is still agreed upon, and that you follow up, but that add a cinematic column to it, essentially. That's my story gaming answer, is that I'd be like, you have a system where you say, but you can't use the word decompression unless we get three hits on this thing. Yeah. You're not allowed to use that word.
That's a war word.
Right, that's a war word. but yeah, so there are obviously degrees before you have to fire. Which one? I didn't see any. Was there something like?
Okay.
I really like playing with new players and introducing. So I do a lot of like Adventures League. I was just wondering if you guys had any advice for what to do with the overeager, the overzealous player that wants to be. Okay, I'm sneaking over there, but I also want to be over in this spot. So like when they really, they want to do everything. So it's a good problem, but
I have some experience with players like this from. I do a variety of for the convention scene mostly, but where brand new players who are new, obviously not just to that game, but to RPGs overall, and often in my experience, they're which is not, this is not dependent on the fix, but in my experience, it's players who are new to sharing screen time at all, right? So what it is not necessarily game dependent, so what, or even to a certain extent GM dependent, is you kind of, the best possible situation is that the players help you make that player realize what they're taking from the other players to do that. Because on its face, if you can have somebody just be like, I'm going to do all this stuff, and everybody gets to do that on their turn, and it's a giant feng shui style game, there's a point where you just go, well, we'll just roll with it, we'll just make it work. Everybody, it'd be gonzo. But to me, the number one thing to do is to make the player understand that when they're doing that, all these actions they're taking, all the stuff that they're doing, all the screen time that they're getting, is not coming from nowhere, which is one of the easy mistakes to make in new RPGs. It's like, well, I can just say anything. I can just make stuff up. I have tons of great ideas. But is that what the cost for those is that every turn you take is a turn that Doug doesn't get to take and that Roger doesn't get to take. Right? Everything that you do, each bad guy you kill is one less thing that we have that everybody else gets to play. So you say, so on your turn, that's why we have these number of actions. Or on your turn, that's why we do this thing. So that if the cold heart of the mechanism isn't doing it, of the game mechanic, in which when you get one action and you can move this far, isn't doing it, is to, I mean, not in any chastising way, right? But it's to point out how their teamwork can make them do stuff better than even one. Because if you say like for example, the last time I had this happen was running a Star Wars Fate game at a game store with a brand new player, and he wanted to do everything. And I was saying, so emphasizing the drama of having to choose, and saying, so it looks like you can't reach both at the same time. Who are you going to ask to help you with this? And that means that the premise of the question, which my experience is that new players especially are less likely to reject the premise of a question, although they are more likely to over-embellish the answer to a question, to overreach. So if you set the premise as, who do you ask to help you? Well then, I have to ask somebody to help me. I'll ask Anne. Anne, you take out the stormtroopers while I take out the towers. Or whatever, right? And so just to use some of that language to help make it easier to understand that if you get to do everything, then the rest of us are just going to go home because we have nothing to do.
Right. And then you say, now roll to take out the towers, and you take out the stormtroopers? Right. You have something else you're doing.
Right, exactly. So you say, so Anne, how do you take out those stormtroopers, or do you do it at all? Do you have another idea? And Anne says, yeah, I'm going to betray him.
You had a question.
I was just wondering how you guys react to, like, I'm not sure in what games it really applies, but in Persuasion or Diplomacy or whatnot, like a natural 20 in a situation where it wouldn't really fit. Like getting the dragon to just leave.
Well, I mean, the thing is, the skill exists for a reason. It's on your sheet for a reason. You're using it for a reason. Now, you can use it where it wouldn't really fit in the sense that, well, the dragon's not just going to leave, but he's still really impressed with you. You think you're awesome. He's going to keep you as a pet. Right? I mean, it's the same as, well, I got a natural 20 with my dart. That should kill the dragon. No, it's a dart. It's not going to kill a dragon. It's a persuasion roll. It's not going to kill a dragon. But no, you impressed him. He's not going to kill you. I mean, he may take your feet off so you can't run, but he's not going to kill you. Right? He thinks you're awesome. He thinks you're the greatest. I mean, he's a dragon. He's starved for conversation. And you say starved really loud. But I think that if a player wants to do something, especially something a little unconventional, you should almost always roll with it because it's going to be more interesting than I hit him with my mace and do 4. I mean, nothing wrong with I hit him with my Mason do 4, but a guy who's sort of off the lot a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit, that's an interesting player. And you meet him in the idiom, but you enforce the reality of the game situation, which is you're dealing with a dragon, dude. It's not like an orc guard where you can say, yeah, I don't want to die today, fuck you people, and just wander off.
Well, and that's the two examples to me that I would use as kind of mnemonics for it, right? Is one is that I have a system that I do sometimes in D&D where I roll first. Right before the player says, I want to try persuasion, and before I say what my dialogue is to persuade the dragon, I'm going to roll and then dramatize the roll. Because if I roll a 2, but I wrote a great speech, I wasted a speech and it doesn't make sense that I rolled a 2. But if I roll a 2, I go, okay, well now I know what a 2 looks like for my character. I know how to play a 2. I know I failed.
Yes.
And this is what it looks like when my character rolls a 2.
As a character who was voted tastiest man in Ariandor, I would like to stop talking now.
I didn't crawl through all that cayenne pepper just to come in here and be killed by a dragon. And if you roll a 20, then you again, that helps establish in advance the fact that the stakes aren't going to be a matter of, well, I rolled it, I'm going to use this conversation to convince him that I'm his twin brother. And I rolled a 20, so whatever I say goes. Well, there's no other rule in the game in which whatever I say goes. So why would that be true with persuasion, right? And so the rolling first is an extreme example, but I find that it works sometimes because it changes the notion of what's at question, what the die roll is answering. But in the same way is that notion that nobody gets to roll in an RPG to play somebody else's character. I almost never allow that unless literally the whole RPG from bottom up is about that.
About mind control or something.
Right. And so in this case, I would say if the dragon rolls a 20 in a persuasion roll against you, I don't tell you what to do. You just decide how you respond to a really charming dragon. And likewise, you don't tell the dragon what to do. I decide how a dragon responds to just the most well-spoken little person. I've never heard anyone. You're absolutely charming. You and I should talk. Would you pardon me just 1 second? I have to kill these people.
For food, you're delightful.
I have never heard a taco make as sound a point as you. Did I say taco? I meant burrito. I'm so hungry. Anybody else? What I'm trying to do is see if we got people who haven't asked already. So, yeah.
I just want to know how you turn murdering hobos into RPG role players.
Well, I mean, if they're playing the roles of murdering hobos, then your problems are solved. If you're saying how do you take people who are only there to kill things and get their stuff into people who have other story goals, is reward them for having other story goals. Bribe them, right? I mean, so
offer and reward.
Yeah, if it's like, well, yeah, you could kill that, entire village, or the alchemist in the village could make you a potion of darkproofness and send you off to beat up his brother who took the true cinnabar that he needs to make other potions. And you begin to invest them on a sheer bribery basis in doing something other than kill everyone and take all of their belongings. I mean, if they never respond to that, if they remain Hobbesian state of nature people, then you just are going to run a lot of straight up tactical fighting. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're bored, you might want to put a bulletin, a piece of paper on the bulletin board here to say, looking for players for my game should have mental age higher than 10, and then see what happens.
Well, that's the place where I agree and the place where I diverge is that I agree with the offer and reward, right? Where you say, to me, it's an example where they roll a 20 and they do 8 damage, and you say, what does that look like? And give them that's done. We know what happened. It's not going to change the damage they did, but it coaxes them into participating in that narrative a little bit. And right now, even if it's just description or action, eventually that can snowball and develop further into I hit an orc but I didn't kill him, and I said, great. So how does he feel about that? Like, is he terrified of you, or is he just gonna want revenge? What do you think? And now they're thinking dramatically, at least, right? They have these kind of questions. The other thing is have that series of combats be dramatic. A dramatic series of combats, not a question of stuff that isn't combat. If they're responding to, I just want to kill stuff and take their treasure, then you say, oh, great, so this next encounter is about all the people from the village who realize that they can cut out the middleman by killing you and taking your treasure. Okay, so wait a minute. Why are they doing that? Because you're a sociopath and you always treat them like one? Or because you're not nice to them? Or because they kept asking, would you save my uncle? He's trapped in the mill. And you say, well, what's in it for me? And they say, I don't have any money. And you say, well, I'm going to go slay this dragon and take all the stuff. They go, great, when you're done with that, we're going to gang up and kill you and take your money and hire adventurers to save my uncle. Right? So that even if they're not being narrative, the series of adventures will naturally become narrative, and they will start getting. They'll start getting their desire for revenge or a desire, and it's not a matter of punishing them for not being narrative, right? It's that you just said that the next encounter isn't just what's through the next door. The next encounter is a result of choices they made before. Then suddenly it's important that they start making choices that they at least find interesting, even if the way that they find interesting choices is to say, oh no, we're just gonna 7 samurai these guys. We're gonna 13 assassins these guys. We're gonna kill the whole village. We got this covered, no problem. You go, fair enough, that's the story that's happening. We'll play to find out what happens. The one other aspect of that is there's a player in the group of a friend of mine who started playing fairly late in life, but it was fascinating to watch that every session he aged 1 year. So in the first session he was, so what can I do? And the second session it was, I kill everything. And the third session was, I kill everything and I take its stuff. And the fourth session was, I kill everything, I take its stuff, because we do that for a while. And then the fifth session was, what if I was a loner in a trench coat? Nobody really knows my motives. It's like, oh, so you've reached that phase in 5 sessions. And so people have a natural arc with gaming where they do kind of trajectory.
Glenn has reached puberty, everybody.
Right. Oh, for you it's 1994. That's great. Just came out for you. That's great. Yeah.
On that note,
Oh, yeah.
there's systems that automatically just like fate.
Right.
It just because something bad would happen, like a character flaw, most time players would be like, I don't play that character flaw. But in that
Right.
game, it's like the whole mechanic works on playing to that character flaw.
Right.
So
I think the inspiration rules in D&D 5 are actually pretty good at this too, depending on how you present them as a DM. But the example is, yeah, so show me your character. We just did this in an event last weekend in Chicago, which was, we had everybody start with inspiration by saying how they had demonstrated it before the adventure. So I say, how do the other characters know one of these 4 things about your character? And you say, oh, you know my flaw because you saw me steal the token off the adventure that we came out here with. There used to be 6 of us. I know there's only 5, the 5 player characters, but I totally stole the boots of the guy who died. And everybody goes, oh. But asking those kind of questions, even if it's just about what's on the sheet and it's for an advantage like inspiration or something, a mechanic that is built in that they're like, cool, I'm just gonna use it to kill more stuff and take its treasure. It eases them into the process of enjoying the questions. And that's always my issue with Fate is, while I love Fate, I know players for whom it can induce decision paralysis when they first encounter Fate, because it creates that situation like, so like the succeed at a cost thing, or is the fact that the narrative rules make somebody say, like they're afraid of the wrong answer, or they have too many answers, they don't know where to start. But Fate's not alone in that. Neither is it alone, like you say, in the systems that do help people reach that point and answer those questions. So you had your hand up, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question of what do you think is the best way to handle a magic heavy group?
Like a bunch of spellcasters, or
No, a bunch of people who have pretty much made the priority to have spellcasting abilities.
oh, I see.
Although
What you mean.
although not necessarily.
Lean into it. I mean, that puts the fantasy in fantasy role playing, right?
I suppose.
I mean, what you suppose? You'd rather? Well, I was really
No,
hoping
but
to play
if-
chainmail guys
But
who
if
walk through mud a
if some
lot.
of them want to play Conan, and it turns out that instead of playing Conan, they're all playing Conan's enemies.
Yeah,
Then you
but the
have-
point is, if they all want to do something, right?
Right.
If they all want to play magic guys, great. The game's about magic now. I mean,
no, I agree with that.
that's
I lean into it at the beginning.
that's why the players get a vote in what kind of characters they want to play. So if you said we're going to go into a dungeon and they're like, "What are you? I'm an illusionist. I'm a sorcerer. I'm a warlock. I'm seeing a pattern. I'm a wizard, and I'm a cleric." And it's like, well, we are doing a lot of magic, and so the treasures will be more magical. The foes will be more magical. The world will be more magical.
The people they
Magic's
know
gonna-
will know. They had to learn all that stuff from somewhere.
Yeah, you'll have a higher magical gain, I guess, on the brightness of the magic is just turned up in the setting.
Well,
Because that's what your players are telling you they want by the kinds of characters they're making up.
I think the counter option to that is that it definitely dials up the gain in what the campaign is about. But it could also be that these are the 9 sorcerers, the 9 magic users in the game setting now. These are the stars, and everybody else wants their stuff because they're like, oh yeah, or comes in with adventures because there's only 3 warlocks and this is one of them. You know, most of the clerics are in your adventuring group or whatever it is.
I mean, but both of those answers, I don't see that either of those is a problem.
No, I don't.
Right?
Neither do I.
Why is it not good if your players are magic heavy?
Actually, I was just asking for an opinion. That's why.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
okay.
fair.
Yeah. No. Right. Okay.
And I think that's true. That goes frankly anytime you get a group that isn't diverse. Anytime you get a group that's all fighters, right? You go, great. So we're going to do they're going to be mercenaries. So they're going to be
Blood
swords
Folk,
or
right? It's
something. Yeah.
the Black Company.
And then part of that also is system dependent. I should just say my opinion is the fact, right, that in D&D now that's not a problem. D&D characters, you can have a party that's all spellcasters. in second edition D&D, there were tactical elements as to what kind of adventures you could have fun playing, because you'd be like, well, everybody has 4 hit points. So adventures are short. But, yeah. No, but thematically or ideologically, I have no problem with it.
Along that same line, is there an issue using the weaknesses of the players to create an artificial toughness to the encounters?
I mean, weaknesses of the characters? Or?
Weakness of the fact that when you get like in 5th edition, or in most D&D, in fact, when you're in engaged combat kind of thing, you get a disadvantage to your spell attack rolls and so forth. Is there a point at which you think that players would start saying, well, you're gearing this against us by picking fights?
We're always fighting monsters that grapple us, and we're a party of spellcasters.
Right. Why are we always fighting the magic absorbing beast? You know, that seems kind of a big move. Yeah, no, I would say that you put the magic absorbing beast or the grappling ogres into the game, and your magic user guys know about it. I mean, they're magic users, for gosh sakes. They're probably casting Divine and Warn and Detect and all kinds of stuff, and it's like, oh, that door is going to lead to the magic absorbing beast. But he's sitting on all of these diamonds and rubies and whatnot, that if he's dead, all their natural magic comes back. Oh man, I want those rubies.
Right, so put it on them.
And then you make it their choice. Are we going to go into that room, or are we going to go into the room of horribly magic vulnerable gnolls? Well, I'd really like to see gnolls explode. That's so great. The fur goes everywhere. It's hilarious. I can cast Cure Light Allergies, and that's no problem for me. And so you let the players pick. You know, they know that it happens, but it's a fantasy. It's full of danger and mysterious things that happen.
And I also think that you do want to mix it up, and then like it's not that you want to do it, right? It's like you say, you want to have one room where, what kind of fun do you want to have today is the question. Not do you want to have fun today? And so, but part of the issue then is also, how do I want to phrase this? If the monsters are always doing the same type things because the game rules make it that's the smart play, I would point out that for example, if the players aren't always making the smart play tactically, they make the occasional mistake. The fact that you got to spend a weekend with this adventure before you ran it because you designed it is not necessarily a reason not to make mistakes as the monsters. You might say, well, I'm playing gnolls and their intelligence is 7. So they're not going to do everything right. They're not going to make all the smart tactical decisions. And what I love is especially when I make a mistake and a player goes, look at that gnoll, he left an opening. And somebody else goes, there's no way that gnoll did that on accident. And then I go, well, that's a sign for me to indicate that the gnoll did it on accident because I did it on accident, but I don't want to say that. So what I want to say is, yeah, that gnoll's not very smart. And what I'm saying is, yeah, I'm not very smart. That's just what
or the gnoll says, yeah, come and get some.
Right.
I'm the greatest magic absorbing gnoll of all. And he throws his arms up and his shield comes off of its straps and flies into the rafters, and he's standing there exposed to anything you want to do to him. I think that every now and again, not all the time, but I think every now and again, running a good old-fashioned beatdown is great fun. You take the player characters and you say, who do they really hate? Who gets up their nose? Ogre Magi. Make up your mind, Ogre Magi. Are you ogres or are you Magi? And so you got like 4 Ogre Magi and 6 characters, and the 4 Ogre Magi are walking through the town, and they're making a lot of Ogre Magi noise, and you're like, you know that the Ogre Magi are coming. That might be ambush country. I mean, I'm no expert, but you're a ranger. That looks like ambush country.
It might be a fun encounter. Just go out there and win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's great fun because it reminds you, the GM, that your players are supposed to be boss, right? They're supposed to be pretty great at stuff. And we always get into how do I calibrate this encounter? How do I make sure that it's a challenge?
Right.
Sometimes it's fun to have a walkover. And it doesn't have to be the whole game is a walkover. You don't want to play a game that's all walkover, but you know, at the opening of the James Bond movie, they do the segment before where James Bond just sort of beats up a bunch of guys and blows up the reactor and shoots that guy in the head. And
proves he can do a whole movie in 15 minutes.
Now we're ready for a movie, you know, that kind of thing. Every now and again, run a little of that. Let the players remember, oh right, yeah, we are kind of superheroes. And then they won't feel as bad if, you know...
I know they might have some respect for the fact that the monsters... and they'll see the die rolls too, right? They're die rolls. But they might have respect for the fact that they're like, well, these monsters are... They're kind of tough. That's intriguing. We should be careful, as opposed to we suck.
So that's not really in response to a question, but it was something I was thinking of because the question we had.
Also remember that if you if you offer them a walkover and you say, here's a nice easy encounter, they will it is entirely possible they will make it more difficult for themselves anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to design it,
Yes.
because they may go, no, this is a trap. What we have to do is create an elaborate super trap that will trap them in their trap.
What we need to do is send our guys out one at a time and just scout. It's like, oh, why do you taunt me? But yeah, I mean, I just like, I like doing that.
Yeah,
I just wanted to back up what you said about giving them the walkover. Having run a game for 4 years, 15 years ago in old D&D, the only thing my players remember were, do you remember those times we ran into those bandits with our 12 little characters? Those poor bastards. No other dramatic thing, monster encounter, or dungeon do they remember, but that is the thing that they always love to talk about.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right.
and again, that's the core experience, right?
Yeah.
You kill the orcs, you take their treasure. If there's if there's a good, fun, easy kill and a lot of treasure lying around, that's a positive. Yeah.
I actually have a question about GMing question really. How do you, when you deal with the same party a lot, like, you know, if you're running a game for the same people, even if it's different games, eventually they kind of get used to you, and it's like, you know, if you make a point, if when you're describing the scene you mention, oh, and there's, to steal a classic, oh, and there's a rifle on the wall, they know you mentioned that because something's about to happen with the rifle.
Right.
So how do you change it up? So, like, do you have any tricks for kind of changing your tells a little bit to keep them from being able to guess what they're about to do?
One of the things I do is I play 2 truths and a lie when I design the adventure, and the lie is never a lie. What it is, though, is I put 2 things that are really important and 1 thing that isn't. The 1 thing that's just true, but is color, right? And I tell myself that when I design a room, and I mix it up what order I give them out in. And I mix it up by, when I do I have 6 senses to work with, and I pick 2 or 3 when I do the initial description, is I say, so this one I have a true sight that is important, oh, that's hiding a secret door. A true smell that is important, and somewhere around here there's a rust monster. And a why about sound, and I can hear the bee's nest that's up in the rafters is buzzing like crazy. That's just because the place is a mess, right? Nobody lives in here, so bees moved in. Those aren't a clue, they're not a trap, right? But they're there, and then next time I say, okay, the thing that, the detail I made that's visible isn't real. Or is real, but it isn't a trap or a secret door or whatever. And just now, once I have it kind of in those slots, I can kind of catch myself repeating myself and mix and match, and then it's just a little less predictable. And that, more than anything, what that does is just makes me more comfortable changing the ways I have to say the same thing. Because a lot of RPGs involve saying the same thing 20 times. And so one of the best piece of writing advice I ever got, for example, was learn how to write the same sentence 10 times, 10 different ways. To say, with a hammer, she killed Frank, versus she killed Frank with a hammer, right? Same thing, but now you have different ways to say
Or
it.
she hammered Frank to death.
Yeah, she hammered Frank to death. Or Frank was killed by a hammer, by she.
Yes, wielded by her. I actually like it when players get to know me and get to know my tells, because that shortens my job. My job as the GM is to tell them what's going on, is to bring them into a story, the bunch of us are working together. It's not an adversarial experience for me.
Right.
Because we're collaborating to make something fun happen.
Yeah.
And if they can tell what I'm doing, that's good. I want them to know what I'm doing, because I want them to either lean into it and say, oh, Ken put spiders in. That means that the Spider Queen is not too far. Lolth, good old Lolth, or Atlach Naka, is going to be there, and there's going to be a Spider Queen, so we're going to start looking for cultists. We're going to start checking everyone check for eggs.
Webs,
you know, we're going to, no eating anything before bed, so you don't have any spider nightmares. And they know that. Or, they say, yeah, it's been a while since we had a good old Spider Queen nightmare story. I'm going to, chow down on delicious aromatic herbs and take a big nap by the fire before we go on to the fight tomorrow. And it's like, well, there you go, spider nightmares coming in.
I feel like giving Ken a gift. I know what'll happen if I do this, and I like it.
And I like it because we're signaling to each other the kind of game we want to play. And if I've committed a tell that I didn't mean to, they're like, oh, spiders, the Spider Queen is here. They're playing characters who've been in this world for X amount of time. They've got ints of 18 or whatever. They've got, spot horrible death trap 40% skill. That they just succeeded without the bother of rolling, is what that is. It's like, no, you're good at things. And again, this is Call of Cthulhu, 7-8 years of Call of Cthulhu. There is literally nothing you can do as a player to break a Call of Cthulhu encounter, right? You can't do it. It's always going to work beautifully. So as the GM, I don't care if you guessed that that was a Shoggoth. Great, good. You're
not better off
scared.
for knowing.
You're already scared before
Right.
you've even opened the basement. You've done my work for me. So when the players can, suss out what I'm doing, and my players know me backwards and forwards, and they just cater to my whims like I'm like a toddler in their hands. But that's great because that's what I want. Is I want them to be part of the story and an active partner in making this fun thing happen.
Right. And that for me is, again, I think that learning how to say the same thing in different ways helps you decide when you're doing that and when you're not doing that. And then Ken's approach also helps for when you accidentally do reveal a tell is that it's, living with it in a happy way, embracing it, making it work. So, yeah. I think those are complimentary answers.
Yeah, right.
Also, Ken is wrong.
Or it could be a trap.
If it were a trap, you would have detected it.
Yeah.
Do you do any kind of warm-ups either when getting a group together for the first time or before a session?
Warm-ups?
Like warm-up activities?
I actually sort of do, but they're not very long. I have things that I do that I don't necessarily say are warm-up activities that are warm-up activities.
Okay.
That I don't with the play. Like for example, the thing I do with the to get
Hits
insight
every
going.
player very, very hard with a putter.
It's not that hard here. I don't hit them that hard.
It's not as hard as you
That's sport,
Fair
not
enough.
warm up.
Fair enough. No, so like one thing they do is the thing I was saying about inspiration, where I say, so each of you, you've finally reached the top of the mountain. Why don't everybody tell me something that your characters reveal about themselves on the way up the mountain? And I do that as a warm-up thing, but that serves an immediate point. And some players embrace that, oh, so we've started playing. And other players like, when are we starting playing? And so those are right on the line. And I do some stuff, it depends on the group. I have players who like to talk about the game as much as they like to play the game, by which I mean that they can do like, so yeah, we were talking about how our characters met the first time, and we think this is, and they can do that for 20 minutes, and that's play for them, right? So even though we're not rolling the dice or engaging thing, and it's not present time in the game, I'm like, the game has started, and they're warming up the table for me. And so that kind of play, where I might just ask questions for 15 minutes, right? Things like, I was wondering, I never really give much thought to this, but how many of your characters knew each other before that first adventure, or knew before today, or how did you guys meet, or whatever? And then I take that information and roll it forward. But I just do it because questions, again, are good technology for getting that process going. I've tried some warm-ups back in the day. I was a theater student. I did some improv and stuff, and so I had a bunch of those at my disposal. And I didn't find that neither my casual nor my serious players who didn't also have similar improv interests engaged in them, which I don't think is a universal truth or anything, as much as it's a fact as to why I stopped doing overt warm-ups. It's because I found that it was intimidating a lot of players more than it was actually warming them up. It was tiring them out more than warming them up.
In my experience, my warm-up, besides just screwing around and ordering dinner and whatever, my warm-up is to say previously.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then that, because of, the CW and, whatever else, we all are conditioned to know, oh, that means the show's going to start. And I say previously, and then if I've actually forgotten where they were, I'll say, Craig, were you in the lobby of the hotel, or were you hiding under the bed in your room? I don't remember. And Craig's like, oh, I would have been in the lobby. Yes, I definitely would. Okay, thanks. And then it's like, and so if Craig was in the lobby, his bodyguard would have had him in the lobby. It's like, I didn't want to be, God, all right, I'm in the lobby. And so we nail it down, and it's like, and you had already finished the potion, yes?